everybody. Welcome to the Bold Strokes Books Bookathon. I'm your host for the next hour. My name is Jane Walsh, and I'm a queer historical romance author. If you're joining us on Zoom, please adjust your settings to gallery view so that you see all of our lovely faces. And if you're feeling chatty, please put your comments in the chat box. There's a live chat roll to the side of your screen. But if you're feeling nosy and you want those questions to go to our panelists, please drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, because sometimes the chat goes a little bit fast and I can't always keep up. So I'll try to get a hold of those at the end of the hour if you have time. And if you've been enjoying the sessions, please feel free to go to YouTube and check out all of the other great panels, readings, discussions on the Bold Strokes Books YouTube page. And of course, if you like what you're hearing from us, please go to the Bold Strokes web store where there is a sale going on all weekend long on these fabulous authors' novels. So this panel that you're attending right now is called The Pining and the Payoff. And the topic is slow burn. This could be emotional slow burn, sexual slow burn. Hopefully we'll get into all kinds. It's going to be a great hour. I am joined by a lovely panel of authors today. In no particular order. Anagram loves drama. Fictional drama, that is. She watches it every day as a sound editor at Sony, working on top series like The Morning Show and Cruel Intentions, which are loaded with drama. I'm like so jealous to be reading this. Like, oh my God. I'm like, oh, I would love to catch up with you about this.
Oh yeah.
Her debut novel, Coming Up Clutch, has plenty of drama, which shouldn't be too surprising because sports always have drama. Whether it's taking, oops, in her real life, Anna prefers to keep her life as drama-free as humanly possible. Whether it's taking a boxing class at her local gym, paring down her TBR pile, or snuggling with her cat Xena, Anna does her best to keep the drama on the screen or on the page for her entertainment. Erin Dutton resides near Nashville, Tennessee with her wife and a very spoiled dog. Her latest book, Traveling Toward Forever, was released in January of this year. It was inspired by a recent road trip they all took together. What's the dog's name, Erin? Gotta
His
know.
name is Booze.
Boo! I love it. So cute. Heather O'Malley is a longtime writer who follows the story where it takes her, even if it defies genre conventions. Her most recent book is Goodbye, Hello, dealing with grief and refound love, and she has a story in the forthcoming Gender Ever After. She's a grandmother, activist, veteran, lover of video games, reading, and her amazing wife. Grandbabies and cats keep her occupied while she toils away in the story mines for the next great adventure. And last but not least, J.J. Hale, who has been devouring books since she could hold one, and has dreamed of publishing romance novels with queer leading ladies ever since she discovered such stories existed in her late teens. In recent years, embracing and understanding her neurodiversity has expanded that dream to include writing kick-ass queer and neurodivergent women who get their happily ever after. That dream became a reality with her debut novel, now a two-time Goldie Award winner. She later rounded out her Truly series with a third Goldie Award. Jess lives in the south of Ireland, and when she's not daydreaming, she works in technology, plays with Lego, and, according to the kids, fixes things. Welcome, one and all. So let's kick things off. In terms of slow burn with pining, what do you personally find more challenging to write? A slower emotional connection or a slower physical relationship? Heather, how about you go first?
Oh, thanks.
Someone's got to go
Uh,
first.
in a lot of ways, I think it's harder to write a slower physical connection because a lot of the people I know and have talked to, sometimes the physical stuff comes very quick, or they might meet, make out, and then develop a relationship. And so sometimes that physical connection is very quick. But having been in several long distance relationships, I'm used to the emotions take longer to happen, and eventually you'll be in the same space. And so sometimes mixing that and getting to the point where people see the payoff of the physical connection might take a bit because of distance or whatever's going on. And so that's actually something that happens in my book Goodbye Hello, is that they have to deal with the parameters of a long distance relationship. And so while they are hot for each other, they live 2 hours apart each direction. So not so much physical until you get all the logistics. So
Long distance is definitely a challenge. Hard to make a relationship work, but the payoff can be amazing. Erin, how about you? What do you find more challenging to write? Slow emotional connection or physical?
I think also a slower physical connection, but maybe for a different reason. I guess I haven't really written much of the long distance romance. So assuming the characters are in proximity to each other, I feel like harder to write the slower physical connection because our readers want to see that physical pull. And so if the characters start to get physical earlier in the book, it's easier for them to buy that than if the emotional connection comes too quick. So I think the emotional connection can naturally happen slower. But if you're dragging out the physical connection, you've really got to have a credible reason and enough of the story for the reader to not go, all right, kiss her already, that kind of thing.
That's a good point. I've definitely read many a romance novel where the first page there's, some on page sexual activity, but I don't think I've ever read one where page one there's the big I love you. So I totally get what you mean there. JJ, how about you? Like, what do you find more challenging to write?
I I would have probably gone the opposite in general. I would have found it much more challenging to write the emotional connection slower. I mean at this I've written a lot of friends to lovers or roommates to lovers or stuff where there was an established bond that and I think that worked for me because I'm all in with the emotion, very quickly, and it's that kind of builds for me. I also write characters who generally are neurodivergent or have ADHD, and a lot of times it's an all or nothing situation. You're either very much all in for someone or not. But in saying that, my latest novel, they sleep together in like the second chapter, so that was obviously the opposite for that book. But in general, emotional, I think for me.
Interesting. Anna, what about you? What's your favorite? What do you find more challenging to write?
I gotta go with JJ, so we're gonna split the group here. I both of my stories, I struggled personally to write the slow emotional, especially with Coming Up Clutch, because I had my characters, I knew where I wanted them to be. It was just how do I get them emotionally there? And how do I do it in a way that the reader's not going to look at me like, well, you just get it over with already. And so I really had to get to know them as I was writing them, which I know if you're not prepared to do that as a writer, it could really make the physical aspect fall a little flat when you finally get to it. And so just having to not only um, write it slowly, it was harder for me in that book. With Coda, I was able to kind of get there a little bit faster um, for a lot of different reasons. But it was still just one of those, they need to be emotionally in a good place to get to the physical that is going to be a good payoff and also make it believable that they're going to find their happily ever after with that. So,
Oh, who do we have joining us?
we have Xena.
Hi, Zena.
She
Oh,
hears me talking, she's got to come running.
she deserves to be here.
Yeah.
She can contribute all she likes.
Oh, yeah. Well, she's in Coda, so it makes sense.
Oh, amazing. So now that we've talked about the challenges of one or the other, now let's get into what your favorite kind of connection to write is. Like, do you like to write nice and slow or hot and fast? And why? Erin, let's start with you.
It really depends on the book. I do tend to write the physical connection a little bit slower, just in general. But I think the characters and the plot drive whether they're going to emotionally connect or physically connect first. For example, I wrote a book about a helicopter pilot and a police training instructor, and they shared a connection to a third woman who had passed away. Um, one was the best friend and one was the former partner of that third woman. And so the emotional depth was already kind of what JJ was talking about, right? That emotional depth is already ingrained in the beginning of the story because they've got this shared connection to a person they both cared very deeply for. But those very same emotions are what that was the reason why they were resistant to the physical connection, because there was this complicated relationship. So in that case, kind of slowed down the physical connection a little bit. So I think that the story can definitely lead to that. I have a really bad habit of getting to the point of being ready to write that first physical connection and then just not being in the headspace for it. So I have, I'll be reading along in my draft, and then there'll be a sentence that just says "write sex here," and then I go to the next scene and just pick it up right there because I've got to get back into that space so I'll go back and pick it up later.
I do the same thing. Like I do all of my sex scenes at the end. So I write the whole book and then I redraft and I redraft. And at the end, like the very last scenes that I write are all the physical stuff. So I can get like the correct physical and emotional arc through all the sex scenes. And I keep track of it better that way. But they're also just really dang hard to write. Like they are really challenging sometimes to really put like everything into words, I find.
Yeah.
Anna, what is your favorite kind of connection to write? Hot and fast or nice and slow?
I prefer nice and slow. I love the subtleness of the slowness. Like it's not just like, okay, yeah, we're getting the emotional connection and then we're just kind of, bam, here we are, we got sex. It's like, no, it's the subtle things like the teasing, like the unconscious innuendo that you say, or just the slightest little touches and bonding over silly things. Those are the kinds of connections I love to see unfold in a slow burn. And it just especially when they're kind of in each other's heads or they're in their own heads and they're just really questioning, is that what I thought it was? Or, it makes for some humorous moments, but it also makes for some real soul searching moments for some characters to be able to just kind of take it slow like that and really be like, this is who I want. This is who I want to be with. We've been building to this the entire time. And then when they finally get to that, the payoff is just so welcome at that point.
It's amazing when it really all comes together.
Mm-hmm.
And Heather, what's your favorite kind of connection to write?
Uh, I also really prefer the emotional uh arc because you know the physical sometimes seems like the payoff for me, but the emotional arc you can have all sorts of fun moments. Like in Goodbye Hello, one of the things I had fun doing was one character was lamenting, I haven't, had a date in a while. This is frustrating. And then there finds out their father dies, and so they're all caught in grief, but this was something they wanted. The other one has had a dry spell because they're in a little town and they don't know if there's any other lesbians there that weren't classmates because they don't want to take classmates. And so they're like, okay. And so when they meet up again and things reconnect, they're in very different places in their heads. And so I get to have each of them kind of find ways to speed the reconnect, but it takes, you know, 100 pages for that to get there because it's I'm thinking this, oh, but grief, but this, but the and so that up and down. And the other one is like, oh my God, she was so hot. What can I do to get her attention? Oh, she always liked my butt. So I'm gonna wear leggings when we go hiking. Yeah. And so that it's a really different contrast and journey for the characters. And I that was a lot of fun because they were doing that. And so for me, that emotional journey, that intellectual journey of how do you get together, what do you do to merge the characters into a relationship, leads to some really amusing points. And I love that. Sex is
So
just, sweaty.
when you're laying the groundwork, lots can come out, that's for sure. Like there's a lot that you have to do, like especially in emotional work, like when you're dealing with grief. JJ, what's your favorite kind of connection to write?
Um, I think I was thinking about my books as everyone's talking, and it's like I was like most of mine I think were faster, but then I was like, wait, no, they're actually kind of not. But I find it easier to write things quicker, to get way into the emotion or to get way into the physical or whatever quicker. So I think that it's more of a challenge for me not to. And my second book, I think, was probably the longest that I went before that connection. And they did have the emotional connection because they were roommates and they were close that way. Um, but one of them, I mean, one of them thought the other was straight, and the other was just figuring herself out, and she was actually demisexual. So she needed that time, that time to really understand herself and build that trust and kind of get to that point. But I did find it hard to kind of draw that out with, as you said, those kind of teasing and the building it up and the really drawing it out side of it. And then in my other book, Synchronicity, they actually very quickly physically had, in the first chapter they met in a bar. They were dancing with each other. There was this big massive chemistry and physical, and then one of them goes to the other, and it was 2 years later in the next chapter. And so that was quite drawn out because there was no trust. That trust was gone. They already had a very brief history, but something that was layered, and they both had a lot of their own stuff to deal with and to kind of get past. And so there was a lot, their own arcs that they had to go through before they were able to really trust emotionally or physically with each other. So I think that, but yeah, I think I generally find it easier to write it quicker. But I did love writing that story and kind of getting them to find themselves before they could really come back and find each other.
Some of it is definitely book dependent,
Yeah.
whether it's what you like to write or not. Like sometimes the book does
Yeah.
dictate.
I do like writing sex scenes, so I think I'm an outlier there. Most people don't. I do. Yeah.
It's just that they're difficult. Like they're challenging. That's the thing. Like they are hard to get right.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree there.
So on the subject of pining, um, what do you consider to be too far? Like when does pining kind of cross the line, cross the boundaries, and become creepy or undesirable or cringy even? Anna, how about we start with you?
The funny thing is, I actually had to kind of address this note when I was writing Coda because I needed to make sure Parker was just experiencing the residual puppy love she had for Hannah back in school, as opposed to just turning into a full-blown stalker. Um, I didn't want that, and obviously, it's like why we don't need to make her like that in any way, shape, or form. So there were things that even because Parker's aware of how she is emotionally involved in a lot of things in her life, she doesn't want to overstep her boundaries, especially with Hannah, who just got out of an emotionally abusive marriage. So she pulls herself back intentionally. And then, of course, Hannah's just also like, you can text me more than on the weekend or try to call me or anything like that. She's like, what I don't need is you texting me 60 times in a row when I don't answer your first text and everything. And she's slowly starting to learn that, yes, it was puppy love. Yes, she had very strong feelings, but having Hannah reassure her that she wants to be with her is very um, great for her in that sense because it just shows that her feelings are validated. But yeah, I had to be very careful that I didn't inadvertently cross her into stalker territory, which honestly is a lot harder than I anticipated when I was first describing her to my editor. And she was just like, yeah, you just have to be careful because a lot of the behavior, even though she was young and didn't understand exactly what she was doing, could be misconstrued by the reader and have them not cheer her on later. So that
That
was
is
my big thing.
that is really interesting that you actually had on page a kind of, right up
Mhm.
to the boundary. And it's something that I'm sure a lot of us really do in real life, like especially when we're young. There are certain
Mhm.
boundaries that you don't understand yet and that you have to kind of
Yeah,
learn and
especially when you're
adapt
trying to
to.
figure out who you are and like
Yeah.
you find yourself suddenly attracted to a woman, which you, growing up in the 90s, you're like, wait, what is this? I didn't have a lot of gay role models growing up. So it was
Yeah.
just one of those things where it's like, okay, how do I express this? Knowing I'm going to have to see this person every day for at least the next year and stuff. So it was kind of dealing with my own stuff from the past, but also trying to put it in Parker and just show these feelings were okay then. They're not totally okay now because you're much more mature. You understand exactly what you've been through, and you're learning from it and everything like that. So that was the big test for me, was to make sure that she didn't just turn into full blown stalker
Right.
on that. Mhm.
Well, it sounds like you did a good job. You really
Thank
balanced
you.
the line. JJ, how about you? Like, how would you prevent characters from kind of becoming creepy or undesirable in some way with the pining?
I think, yeah, I'd similar with so my first book, Truly Wanted, they were best friends. And going back when I went kind of back when they met in college, Sam had like a definitely a crush on Brooke, and was into her until she met her boyfriend and stuff like that, and it was that kind of, and then they became best friends, and Brooke got married, and Sam was really close to both of them, and they were best friends and all that. So later, when those feelings are still kind of, I was describing those feelings are still there, but I had to be very careful that it wasn't. She was just pining after her married best friend the whole time. Like I didn't want to invalidate their whole friendship or make it, seem like she was waiting for her or waiting for her husband to die, which is what happened. I didn't want, to go into that thing where, um, yeah, I just think that would have invalidated even Brooke's relationship. And I wanted to be very careful that that was a very important relationship for both of them and for their life. And I actually, part of it was I just had Sam describe that to herself. We're people. Like their characters are also people. And like she did question herself, oh my God, like, this is my best friend and is this going to seem weird? And she didn't want to, you know, sully the memory of her husband or any of that. Or she was like, she was worried in her head that is Brooke going to think, I've just been waiting for this opportunity or that kind of stuff. So she had all that to deal with. And obviously not wanting to ruin the friendship and all that kind of stuff. So I think part of it is just acknowledging it, acknowledge it on the page that this is a thing that they're worried about or thinking about. And then reassurance, I suppose, on both sides that it is mutual and it is something that they both want. In my latest release, then it was kind of the opposite. They get sleep together very quickly, and then she finds out it's her new nanny. So there was like the boss relationship, the live-in nanny. So all of a sudden the next day they're faced with, oh, we now live together and you take care of my children. It's and they didn't know that beforehand. So for that, I think it was kind of making sure that the power dynamic was dealt with there, because for for Eliza's side, it's like you're her boss now and she lives with you. So she's dependent on you in those ways. And I had to be very careful that that was addressed carefully too, because I didn't want to go into that kind of creepiness of, is she just doing this to please me because I'm her boss? Or, is this something we both mutually want as adults? So,
I love
yeah.
the sensitivity and the thought that people are putting behind this. Like that there's a lot of intention on the page about what we are showing as authors and what we aren't. And I think that's really interesting to hear that people are explicitly engaging with this and making sure that like we don't cross lines or as best we can. We're all humans.
Or
So
that any lines are crossed intentionally.
yes, yes. Heather, do you have any feedback on this? Like when pining becomes creepy or undesirable or cringy even?
Uh, yeah, a story I'm refining. Uh, it's a reincarnation love story where one of the character discovers this book that describes her life. And so she's like, "What?" But there's another character in there that there's supposed to be this romantic bond there because this is the other person in the romance. And they're like, I does this person even exist? And her best friend, in an attempt to be helpful, hunts her down on TikTok, where she does dances and videos. And so she's watching these. Like, on one hand, it's, oh my God, this other character from the story is real and I can see her. But the other is, I'm cyber stalking this person. And then several chapters later, you discover the other girl has been cyber stalking her and has actually is on her friends list, but she has never noticed because it happened way too early because she read the book several years earlier and hunted her down because she had the name. And so it's this weird, how do the book says you're going to meet at a certain time. So how do you not ruin that while you're trying to find out who this person is in the modern era? And it gets weird sometimes. And yeah, I had fun with that because they both seem a little stalkerish at times, and but they're not trying to be. It's just the nature of, hi, I've been following you for, you know, 5 years, and I think I'm your past life wife.
So
How
mutual
can you deal
stalking
with
just
that?
cancels each other out.
Okay. Well, thank you. That helps. That helps.
Yeah, that's
That
interesting
sounds
because it's like
amazing.
real life behavior. That's definitely like, hmm. But in the context of a book, and there's definitely like there's a life plan here. It could be fate. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it pretty much derails everything in their lives. Because one of them's like, I'm going to be a physicist, and now it's, oh, what? I don't know.
Sounds great. We'll have to keep an eye out for it when it comes out. So when you do take it slow in a novel, how do you prevent frustrating the reader while the relationship is still developing? Oh, sorry. My cat just walked in the room. I have to make sure
It's
he's not being
cat
too
day.
loud. They surprise you sometimes, these little guys.
hmm
Like,
So, sorry to repeat, when you take it slow, how do you prevent frustrating the reader while the relationship is still developing? JJ, let's start with you.
I think it's making sure there's enough substance, make sure that um you have enough else going on that they're interested and they're gripped enough to stay with you, and also that it makes sense that you're not just dragging it out to write a slow burn. It's not that's not your intention. You're not setting out, oh, I want to write a slow burn, so I'm going to make them pine for X amount of pages. Like if it makes sense to their story and their journey and together, the reader generally will follow you on that journey. I mean, not always. You're not going to please everyone. I think we all said that, at the start here. There are going to be people who are like, oh, it was too slow, or there'll be people like, oh, it's too fast. And they're just not your readers, potentially. So, but in general, once you're being true to them, and I think also just judge by yourself. You're going to read this book far more than anybody else in the world is going to read this book. So if you're getting frustrated at it, they probably are. So maybe then go back and revisit. Um, but like it's going to be stuck in your head more than anyone. So make sure you enjoy it when you're doing that.
That's a great tip for any kind of thing that you're putting in the book. You're so right. We do read and reread as we edit and we re-edit. You got to make sure that you're enjoying it yourself.
As much as possible.
True. There are some parts that are just, yeah, they're a headache, no matter how way you cut it. Um, Heather, how about you? How do you prevent frustrating the reader?
uh, a lot of it is if things kind of stall, even if just briefly, I think it's really easy to lose the reader. So you kind of have to have continuous motion. It could be very slow, but if there's a progression towards a direction, then the reader keeps getting pulled along. And even if you're leading to this nice slow burn, they're like constantly slowly drawing together, and at that point it's probably gravity forces pulling them so really slow. And so, you know, if you don't give them enough movement, then readers are like, we just read 3 chapters where nothing happened except they dreamed about each other. How is that helping?
It can be difficult because sometimes the dreams are really juicy and you want to get them on the page.
Oh, absolutely.
Anna, how about you? How do you prevent frustrating the reader?
I have found actual physical obstacles are a very good tool to have in your stories, whether it's you know, a certain power dynamic where it's like you got a teacher student, coach player, or boss nanny, whatever. Having those power dynamics and having them address it early that, yes, I'm attracted to you, but we can't do anything about it, gives you a starting point to be able to build the longing for these two characters. But again, like Heather said, you have to be careful not to stall out. It has to still keep progressing. They can't just be like, okay, yes, we've acknowledged we're attracted to each other, and then it just kind of stays stagnant, the status quo, like nothing is happening for the next, 2 or 3 chapters. You got to build in there like little looks, little nuances that kind of show what is going on, and like start small and then slowly, slowly build is what you need to do. And then again, if you do that correctly, the payoff is just so amazing when you finally get there.
Absolutely. And Erin, how about you? How do you prevent frustrating the reader?
Oh, I'm not really sure that I always do on the physical slow burn side, because I have one friend who reads everything I write, but she's constantly frustrated with how long it takes my characters to end up in bed together. I'll get like a text from her with a page number, and it just says, seriously, so like
With
I
the
actually,
page number.
yeah, like it took this long to get here. I did actually write a book about like a woman who was inherited a house and was rehabbing the house, and like is extremely attracted to her contractor very soon, and they had sex in like chapter 2, and I was like, I wrote this especially for you. Like, this is just for you. But I mean, on the emotional side, yeah, this you have to really understand the, like Anna said, you have to understand the obstacles to what's keeping them apart. Otherwise, why is it a slow burn? Why in the modern age are they not able to just get it together and be in a relationship? So you have to understand the conflict, and it has to be a believable conflict. And then you have to make sure that every scene, either the reader is learning something about one of them or they're learning something about each other. It has a purpose. It's not just filler to get you to your word count before you get these two characters together. So it's really about understanding those beats in your story and understanding what the characters have to learn and go through in order to get in the emotional, intellectual, and physical space to be able to really be 100% there for the other person.
That's a really good point, and it's a point that makes me grateful that I write historicals because my characters can't just pick up the cell phone and call each other. And there's a lot of times where letters can get lost in the mail, and maybe their family decides to leave London for a little bit, so you can get some really great distance and logistics things going on there that is a little bit harder sometimes in contemporary.
Yeah,
Sometimes
that
I'm
makes
glad at the
sense.
genre that I've got. So when you are developing story, how do you decide how the relationship progresses between your characters? Do you choose the relationship style like slow or fast to suit the plot? Or do you look for the natural fit that characters like that you already have in your mind? Like, do you start with plot? Do you start with character? Do you start with trope? How do those elements dictate what kind of relationship the characters are going to have? Erin, how about we start with you?
So I think all three of those things influence um, what kind of relationship they're going to have. But I feel like I write contemporary romance. I feel like the number one key for me is character. Who are the characters? What is their history? What are they looking for? What have they experienced? Because I feel like as people, all of those things influence how willing we are and how open we are, and um, how comfortable we are, with the emotional stuff, the physical stuff, all of that, and how secondarily, how does the character, how do I expect the character to change? What is their arc in the story, and what levels of intimacy are they comfortable with at each phase of the story? The plot and the trope, if you will, are secondary. They can influence how fast or slow the relationship progresses, like Anna said, and like Heather said with the long distance. These things are obstacles to the happy ending, right? So you still have to deal with them and they still have to be addressed. But I think that the characters and how willing they are to trust and love and be with that other person really drives the progress.
A lot of it is kind of situational, which one is kind of the driving force. Anna, how about you? Like, how do you negotiate this like within your own work? Like, do you kind of go for plot, character? Like, how do those things dictate the relationship progress?
Well, with coming up clutch, I knew how I wanted Razor and Ashton to interact, and I wanted them to have a history, but I really had to work to find exactly what that style was for my plot. Because I'm going to give a little spoiler alert here for people who haven't read it yet. It's like Razor's a former player. She left under mysterious circumstances. Ashton has no idea what those circumstances are. All she remembers is the cocky little freshman catcher that she inadvertently started having a crush on right before she graduated. So to have them come back into each other's orbit in a way that felt organic, but also was um, really reflective of who they were back then and who they were now, even though it only been like 8 years, I think I said, had passed. It took a little time to find it for me. So that way, when they finally, decide, hey, we're going to be together, they have so much respect for each other as individuals that they are like, you're doing this. I don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. And I'm doing this and I'm like coming to terms with how things happen. So let's just kind of hold off on this whole like doing the big sex scene or anything like that a little bit longer. And we'll just get to know each other as friends more than anything else. Friends that can kiss, if anything. Um, yeah, but that one I really, really had to work for to be able to make sure it fit into the plot of the book because I have a mystery with Razor that needs to be solved, but I needed to make sure I didn't totally focus on that. And that was a big note I got from my editor was like, it's great you have this, but it can't be the top focus. You need to have your romance in there. And when she told me that, and I was able to start threading the romance into the story, that's when it started clicking with them. With Coda, it was completely the reversal. I figured out the romance first, and then I put the story points in there. And she was very happy when I did that. But again, I think because Coda was very much based on a lot of things that happened in my life, it came to me a lot easier to do that. So I I have done it both ways where sometimes it just comes very natural and sometimes you have to work for it. But either way, the work you put into it is so worth the payoff if you do it correctly.
Yeah, no matter which way you approach it, like as long as the end result is satisfying, then that's what the reader's
Yes.
really going to engage with.
Mhm.
JJ, how do you decide how the relationship progresses? Like, what do you kind of go for first?
Um, Character always pretty much for me. I think, I mean, when I send proposals into Sandy, and I think the only thing that doesn't change by the time I write the book is characters. Everything else kind of, as I go, I'm like, oh, this happened now. Or I was supposed to do this, and no, instead I've done this. But who those characters are very rarely change at all, right from the start I kind of know who I want to write. Not necessarily what, but who. Um and so that kind of builds from there. And a lot of the times that's natural. Like if you really, really know your characters And I mean, you need some sort of plot. Like you'll have an idea of a plot that's going to happen, but if you really know your characters, it will progress, kind of naturally from, okay, what would they actually do in this situation, or what way would this actually go? And it kind of builds out from there. And sometimes that'll be slower, sometimes it'll be faster. And once it makes sense to them, I think that's what matters most. But mine tends to like to change a lot from from what I initially think is going to happen in the plot. And actually that is because of the characters. I wrote them, and as I started understanding them as it goes, I'm like, they wouldn't do this. Or this is what I planned, but that actually makes no sense to who this person is now. The building blocks that I've made, won't need them here.
Feel like that happens to me in almost every book that I write. Like the first 50% I feel is pretty solid and like I know what's going on. And the last 50% absolutely changes by how the first half went.
Yeah.
And you're right, like the way that the characters develop, like they're not going to act that way in the second half because of how I've set them up in the first half. And there's a lot
Yeah.
of wailing and gnashing of the teeth on my end as I try to get that all together in the end.
Yeah. Like with my second book, the big moment in the book and all this completely changed from what I had planned it to be, because at that point I was like, she wouldn't do that. That makes no sense whatsoever. And I was like in my head going, what am I going to do now? And I have to kind of completely come up with something different, but it worked a lot better.
Are you then able to kind of save that idea for another book at least? Like you've done at least
Yeah,
some.
gone now. Out of my head.
And Heather, how about you? Like, how do you decide how the relationship progresses?
Like pretty much everyone else, based off of the characters. I mean, one of the things that really informs how I approach story is I was trained as an intelligence analyst. And initially, you look, oh, situation, this is how it builds, and you try and make sense out of that. But if you know the players involved and how they think, it becomes easier to analyze what's going to happen because you're like, this person's motivation is this, and it moves in this way. And so I take that and apply it to my characters. And so I have a situation like in Goodbye Hello, the main character, I want to be in a relationship, but now I have to deal with this, and this grief is all consuming, and then I stumble into this. And it's it's really interesting how I realized she would take that chance to give to give this possibility a shot because she's been desiring it. And so seeing that part of her, I'm like, I'm throwing you in this situation. Let's see what happens. Okay. And true to who you are, you're going to make the effort to try and establish this relationship because this is what you want anyway. And so even though you're grieving, this is something to like reach out to like a lifeboat, but not in a desperate, I need, you're like, oh, help me through my trauma, but this is what I want, and I'm going to try and do both at the same time. And I thought that was interesting. And while where the other character had a completely different approach, and because she wanted a relationship and things had been dry and tough, and she was like, okay, I'll check this out, and then finding out that her ex, who when she last saw them, they were male and they had transitioned, and she was like, oh, 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 and she just everything spun on this change because she broke up with him in high school because she wanted to date girls and she didn't want to cheat on him because they had had a good relationship. And so now their different points of view slam into each other. And I'm like, okay, now where do they go? And so it's very much the characters and what they desire and what they're aiming for in their own lives will tell me whether it's slow, whether it's fast. If it is fast, how fast? And what are they pushing for? Are they pushing for something physical? Do they want something more? And so I just have to listen to them. And sometimes it leads me in weird places. Like the story is about grief, but then it spins to be about love because taking this chance in that one moment. And so it's a little bit about both, which is why it's more general fiction than straight romance, because it's not two people meet in the first chapter and then we see where it goes. It's I'm dealing with this. Oh, this opportunity has appeared.
So it's a more complicated kind of narrative that you're working with. Yeah.
Mhm.
But very character driven. It sounds really interesting. So for the next question, actually, like for show of hands, do you all write dual point of view narratives? Does anybody write single point of view? Like dual point of view? Everybody?
Yeah, I do.
Single point of
Mhm.
view? Anybody?
Haven't yet.
Haven't
Not
yet.
yet. Yeah.
Depends on the story.
Yeah.
Because I had a question that I'm really interested in from a technical point of view, but this will be kind of more for anybody who wants to weigh in then, because a lot of you are not writing both kind of stories. But I feel that some stories really benefit from like a like single point of view or a dual point of view. I prefer to write dual personally. Like I think it's important to me to have both characters on the page, their thoughts, their feelings, the full range of what's going on. I want to know and I want the reader to know. But sometimes I have read slow burns that are single point of view, and I just wanted to know if anybody had an opinion on this. Like, do you have any opinion on the impact that the point of view actually has? Do you find it frustrating? Do you find it more compelling because you only really get one side? Like, so I'm going to open this up to anybody who wants to answer this because you don't have to. But okay, great. Heather, start us off.
Uh, I, I have written a couple of single point of view stories. Some of them are fan fiction, some of them are other stuff. But one of the things I noted is I can mess around with how a character perceives things so much more. Because if you have 2 points of view, it's it's a lot like that thing. If you have two people reporting on a same event, you get these different views. And so the reader can go, oh, I see how this works. But if you only have one person seeing things, they're like, oh my God, I look like such an idiot. Oh, and the other person at the same time be going, oh my God, that was so adorable. And with the single point of view, you can have the character just feel like an idiot and they're like, oh, I messed up so bad. And then they encounter and absolutely trip and fall on their faces because the person's like, oh yeah, that was really sweet last time. And then they're like that you keep them off balance much more if you limit both sides of the story because if you give both sides, the reader can find a balance where the character can't.
The author has so much control over those kind of stories. Does
Yeah.
anyone else want to weigh in on this topic?
I'll weigh
Yes.
in. I have read a lot of single POV, and my whole thing with them is if I'm not sitting there trying to guess what the other point of view is supposed to be, like if I'm not wanting to read it, then the author did a really good job of just expressing everything that you're wanting to have in that one perspective. I don't need the other perspective of that other character because they fleshed it out enough that I'm like, I'm totally getting both sides just from this one person. Um, Otherwise, if I don't have that, if I'm sitting there just kind of being like, I wish I knew what this other person was thinking, then I just kind of find it a little lacking in that regard. But otherwise, I have no problem if as a writer, if I feel like I can tell the story from both sides effectively, like I can feel the emotions from both my characters, I will do it. I will put both POVs in there. If I'm feeling it from just one, I will have a talk with my editor and be like, look, I know we said this, but I'm really feeling like it's this, if you're okay with that. And then we'll go from there.
Yeah, it's good to have your options open, like for whatever kind of whatever direction the story takes you.
Mhm.
I
So
had
JJ,
originally
yes?
I had originally planned and proposed synchronicity as single first person point of view from Haley's point of view. Um, and then when I started writing out the proposal and my ideas for them, Haley's point of view had like, or thing had like this much, and Cal, the other love interest, had like this much on her backstory. Because when I started writing the proposal, I was like, oh, and this and this and this would be really interesting. My editor was like, I think this is Cal's story. Like, Cal is in here a lot. And I just realized I wasn't going to get the depth of her character to where it needed to be to tell the story correctly without her point of view. Like, there was no way, at least for a long time in the book, that Haley was going to be able to give us that depth of why Cal was how she was and felt how she was and had the trauma she had and had the backstory she had to make the reader like them. And I think if I had written it just Haley's point of view, the reader would not have liked Cal. At the start it would have been, against them. But I think from like purpose of your question, I think that there's some ways it would be easier single point and some ways harder. I think easier in this maybe the slow burn aspect of you'd be able to draw it out because you have this one character you're focusing on and why it's slow for them. You don't really need to go into why it is for the other person yet, and until you can kind of build up to that. But on the other side, it's probably easier to fall into the creepy stalkerish side of things if you're not getting both points of view, right? If you only have one person's point of view, it's kind of you have to work much harder to make this person not weird or creepy or if you're not seeing that the other person is fine with this and how they are. So I'd say it has positives and negatives both
That's a
sides.
good point. It can backfire. Erin, do you have any closing thoughts on this topic, or?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said there. One thing, what's interesting to me is I'm seeing a lot of books lately that are written, but when you mentioned first person, that are written first person but dual point of view, where you're flip flopping. Every other chapter is the other character's point of view, and I think in some ways that can be hard to write as well because you've really got to differentiate your characters so much that you're not finding yourself. I'm three paragraphs into this first chapter, and I don't know what character is talking. Right, I have to go back and check the title of the chapter to see who am I in right now. And so, as a reader and as a writer, I think that can be challenging. I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done not as well. So that's another when we talk POV, and typically first person single point of view, but I'm seeing a lot of first person dual point of view now.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. And if the author's voice is very strong, with both kind of characters, then it really does work well. But it can get a little bit lost sometimes. I also have to check chapter heading sometimes to remember where I am in those kind of books. But still enjoyable stories. So thank you very much for your time, everybody. We're pretty much at the end of our panel. I hope that you've enjoyed watching. Please check out all of these authors' books. They are on sale. All the 2025 to 2026 ebooks are on sale all weekend long at boldstrokesbooks.com. So please check them out. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care,
Okay,
everybody.
ready.